Before we dive in, here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts.
Do you like movies?
Do you like sports?
I've never played that sport on the screen, but I really enjoyed how the movie made me feel.
Well then, have we got a show for you. The Adrian Moment is where my friend Ocean and I discuss the triangulation of sports, movies, and life.
We dive deep into the movies, discussing how they relate to and have affected our lives.
We will talk about why the sport matters to the movie, why you don't have to love the sport to enjoy the movie, and mine a few nuggets of meaning inside the story you may not have realized was really there.
After listening to our show, come join us for more conversations about the movies that portray the thrill of victory
and the agony of defeat.
Find the Adrian Moment podcast on your favorite podcast app and join us while we cover the sports you love and the ones you never think about.
You will never see sports or sport movies the same again.
Hey, psst. Hey, you see that Snickers over there? If no one's looking, you should just take it.
No! Don't listen to him, my son. That would be stealing, and stealing is a sin.
Sin Schmin, it's a friggin' Snickers bar. You deserve to have it. Sinning really satisfies you.
Repent, my child. Virtue is the only real snack worth savoring. For that candy bar is merely a gateway to nougat damnation. Has this ever happened to you?
Listening to the devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other, and you're not sure what to think?
Then we're here to help. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Tommy Metz III, and this season on All the Feelings, we're examining the 7 deadly sins.
You know, the fun ones.
And the 7 heavenly virtues.
Which are also a thing. Through personal stories, historical oddities, and way too much embarrassment, we take you on a thrilling journey through all the goods and the bads you hear about in church.
But without all that pesky church stuff. So come join us for All the Feelings Season 9, a sometimes funny podcast about being human. All the sins, all the virtues.
All in one place. Go to allthefeelings.fun to learn more, or subscribe to All the Feelings wherever you get your podcasts.
Game over.
All right, hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Generations podcast. Today we are again taking you deep into the depths of the Star Wars archives. We're going into the vintage section of Star Wars as it is listed on your Star Wars Disney Plus app or whatever, however you watch it. And one of the things you will find there is the Droids Adventure. Friends, this was the first ever animated show. It was not the first Star Wars property on TV, as that was the holiday special that we have talked about once and will now never be discussed again.
I still want to watch it.
Oh, you still haven't seen it?
I haven't seen it.
Okay, no, we may make it a holiday tradition. Is that we're going to watch it and drink some eggnog and roast it together. That'll be fun.
I would like that.
All right, cool. We're going to make that happen. But back to this. Droid Adventures was one of the first shows we ever got. It is. I don't expect you to have seen it, and we're not going to talk too much about like plot points because there kind of isn't really one. It's it's
episodic.
Say again?
It's episodic.
Yeah, it's episodic, and actually kind of like what we get with the Clone Wars. The episodes kind of have 3 or 4 main arcs, and it is about C-3PO and R2-D2 before they join up with Princess Leia. So this is all before A New Hope. And it is not canonical anymore because it, all the stuff about like them getting their mind wiped and stuff like that at the end of Rebels or Rogue One or something like that, where that gets mentioned. I forget what it is, but like that's not existing. But mostly mostly this was a fun way to sell some toys and to like introduce the idea of animation, and to like give little kids a way to have more time with C-3PO and R2-D2. And it is very much a kid's show, but I think it's pretty cute. I think I had kind of a nostalgia for it because it's very much the 80s animation style. Like if you've watched original He-Man or She-Ra or Gummy Bears or like things like that, it is very much that kind of animation style. It looks very amateurish to us today, but I'm sure at the time felt like, oh my God, can you believe they can do this? And the plot lines are pretty silly. And the characters are all fairly two-dimensional, and the plot lines are pretty obvious. But it's, it's a fun little adventure through the world at that time of Star Wars and watching our heroes basically just like have the same adventure again and again and again.
Mhm.
What was your kind of introduction to it?
I had literally never heard of it until you put it in the group chat like a week ago.
Okay,
I
cool.
had no idea. And boy, what a thrill it was, let me tell you.
I'm sure.
Yesterday, I just got baked and just fucking watched the entire show while I was cleaning my apartment.
Okay.
And now that little like theme song is just like stuck in my head. I loved it. I loved every second. And like I haven't watched too many old cartoons, so I'm not really used to that style.
Yeah.
So it did kind of get me. There was a few times I'm like, what the fuck kind of emotion could this possibly be portraying right now? But I enjoyed it because of that.
I feel like my sobriety may have been a big part of why I was not able to find the joy in Endure, but it was like, I was doing a big spring cleaning project, and so I had it on while I was, like, doing dishes and, like,
Yeah.
folding certain laundry and stuff like that, and there were, like, definitely fun moments. The theme song is pretty baller.
Pretty
It is,
good.
very on the nose. I think it's, like, the lyrics are like, "We're going on an adventure, but we have these man-made brains that keep getting us into trouble." I think just kinda like I'm not saying there's any, like, great insights into it, but, like, it's fun to see more of them being who they are. The first main plot arc is in all of it, we have this sort of definitely, like, anti-Empire feeling. A couple of times C-3PO reveals that he wants to be a freedom fighter too, and that he has the bravery to go fight the Empire. So that part doesn't quite line up with the rest of the canonical appearances of Mr. C-3PO. But, like, so at first they're mostly wrapped up with, this group of, like this is pre-pod racing, like, this is made years before pod racing, but clearly, like, they were already having the idea of there being these, like, racers of, like, land-based, vehicles.
Yeah, like
And
speeders.
kind of very much like Resistance, they get kind of wrapped up with a group that of, like, kind of ne'er-do-wells who are trying to build a great racer, and then they have, like, the Empire itself isn't directly involved, but there's a couple other, like, major crime bosses who are screwing with them. We get Boba Fett. Boba Fett, who, of
Mhm.
course, first appeared in the holiday special, so you have still not seen his origin story. We'll get that for you at some point.
Actually, I when I hung out with Alex once, he specifically made me watch that part, and I was like, "Can we watch the holiday special?" He was like, "No, I won't watch that, but we will watch this like 10-minute clip." I was like, "Okay,
You haven't seen Life Day. This is truly tragic.
I
But yeah,
know."
so Boba Fett gets involved. That's the first kind of main plot, and then, like, they get sold. Basically, one thing we are very much reminded that of this is that, like, slavery of droids is just very much the thing, and
Mhm.
C-3PO and R2-D2 are very much like, nope, we've got a new master now. This is great, and we're not
Yeah,
supposed to be questioning that at all. Which is, I'm sure, as a 10-year-old, I would not have minded in the
yeah.
slightest. But then they go through all those adventures, and then they get kind of teamed up with this. It felt to me like a Princess and the Frog storyline, because they basically get teamed up with this guy who no one wants to help, and he doesn't speak, he doesn't interact with anyone. But then they find out that he actually is the king of no, he's the prince of some, like, big planet, and they don't have to
Yeah,
kiss him, but they basically have to, like, help him find himself again. And then there's lots of adventures with him.
yeah.
And then that's about where I stopped watching because I wasn't able to get through the first season entirely. So what was the third kind of big plot arc?
The third plot arc, it was about this guy named Mundo, which was crazy. Mungo, excuse me. Mungo,
Okay.
it was like Bowel or I can't. I didn't like it that much. It was like he's just like an adventurer. His dad owns like some shipping merchant company or whatever. It's like
Uh-huh.
these famous people, and he's trying to find the source of what's like called a rune stone. So like
Okay.
finding the source of some fancy thing to get rich. I don't know. It was weird. I didn't like it as much as the others. There was still some fun characters. There was more racing. But
Okay.
this time
That's
it was
cool.
on like elope type things, like
Mhm.
kind of animals. And there was this really badass character, don't remember her name, sorry. Um, it was really funny. She's wearing like a Lola Bunny style like basketball like shorts and everything.
Okay.
Maybe like new Lola Bunny, like actual basketball shorts, not like the booty shorts. But I was like, why is she wearing basketball gear? But okay, like go
You
off
know,
because
we
she's an athlete.
I feel like we just have to remember that this is kind of like if you think of, like, your favorite, like, movie or TV show, and you get to watch like when the people first sat down and threw out a lot of ideas, and a lot of the ideas are terrible, but several, you see the germination of original things. For example, in one of those plot arcs, one of the minor characters, but one who gets name dropped a bunch, is Kylo Ren.
Kybo.
Yeah, Kybo
Well,
Ren.
his name is Kybo Ren Cha, and for some reason, after the first episode, we've dropped the Cha, and now it's just
he's just
Kybo
called
Ren.
Kybo Ren.
I was like,
And
okay.
I'm sure that was a character who like Lucas thought was going to take off, or he always liked that name because so no, of course he didn't make the sequels, but someone clearly was aware of the character of Kybo when they named Kylo Ren. So
Yes.
I did think that was kind of fun connection. And then in season 2, do we ever actually get involved with the Empire or the Rebellion itself, or is it always them kind of on the Outer Rim's peripheries?
I'm sorry, season 2?
Oh, yeah, okay. So neither one of us watched that. That's fine. There were 2
I
seasons.
thought there was oh shit. Okay, yeah, no way I was gonna body that entire series yesterday.
I
I didn't even realize that.
Because this isn't like the micro series. Like it's each season is 13 episodes, and the episodes are half an hour. So like that's like
Shit, man.
4.5 hours is one season. I was like, you watched
Wait.
this for 9 hours? That is impressive.
There's only one episode in season 2, and it's 47 minutes long.
Oh, well, now we really seem like jackasses for not having watched it.
Right? I'm like, damn, am I a dick?
Anyway, we did our best. This is definitely going to be a micro episode, so we're not going to have too much to say about it. But yeah. So what were some of your kind of favorite dynamics from the show?
I really liked the middle story that we got with
Mhm.
these characters, Jan and Jess. Jan is a man.
Mhm.
And Jess, her name was Jessica, spelled fancy, of course, because this
Yep.
is Star Wars.
Probably a 3 for one of the S's,
Correct. But yeah, I kind of liked their storyline because it was the one connected with that prince. And it was kind of similar to Luke's story of like, oh, I'm a poor farmer trying to make things work, and my
Mhm.
uncle has sent me to purchase some like a droid to help, and instead he purchases an android, which they then find out R2 scans, and R2's like, yo, that's full organic.
Right.
And they were like, what? So they kind of nurse this guy back to health. And at first his uncle, oh, what was his name? His uncle, it was like Uncle Grungy. That was it. Grungy? I don't know.
I think it's Gruddy. Yeah, it's one of those two.
Something so funny. But he was like, fuck this guy. I don't want to have to feed him too. And then as it turns out, the like 8-foot tall guy is super strong and helpful. And he was like, actually, maybe he can stay.
Yeah.
And then they find out he's a prince. And then Jan, I think, and Jess, yeah, they all then travel to his planet to help him like take it back because this was so funny. I was like, is this the movie Aladdin? Because he said like a spell was put over me by like an evil vizier. And then the moment they showed the evil vizier, I'm like, bitch, that's Jafar. Like you got the red and black and everything. That's just Jafar. Like
well,
I thought it was pretty funny.
On the one hand, we're about 10 years before Aladdin comes out. On the other hand, this might break your little heart, but the movie Aladdin, as good as some of it was, may have dealt with some fairly, common stereotypes and tropes. And so the look of Jafar was not completely original for the time.
I suppose.
I know.
I suppose you're very right.
But yeah, no, it's definitely like, yeah, it had Frog Prince aspects. It had Aladdin aspects. It was definitely all this weird magic that we never deal with again. But yeah, it was just kind of like a fun little story. Like I think that storyline is probably the one I was the most invested in.
Me too. Yeah, I liked that one a lot.
What did you think of C-3PO wanting to be a freedom fighter?
I don't even know what was going on with 3PO in this. He was just, my guy was all over the place. I mean, in the first arc, I feel like actually no, I can't figure it out. Because like you said, he's like a freedom fighter. He's like, let's get it. And then he continues to complain the entire time about how he's not qualified and he doesn't want to be there. So I feel like it's still very typical 3PO, to be honest with you.
Yeah, he just has these little delusions of grandeur from time to time.
It's just the problem is this came out in what, like the 70s, right?
No,
80s?
this is like I think this comes out after Return of the Jedi. So yeah, I think it's 85 or 86.
Okay, my bad. This came out in like the 80s, and 3PO is the only one who like communicates. So obviously R2, as we know, is going to be the one who's like, let's fucking get it. But there's no way for them to portray that. or that
Right.
they had like figured out yet.
Yeah, like
Um,
always, it's beeps and boops, and we have like our characters responding to what R2 says, and so we can kind of
mhm,
get the gist of it, but we never actually know exactly what words R2 has said.
yeah. Um, I still like to believe that the beeps and boops aren't necessarily about him being a droid. It's just that he's actually cussing the entire time.
And then he's got like a language filter on him.
Exactly.
That makes sense because like Chopper is probably similar, but sometimes Chopper is just using like a weird electronic voice to actually say words. So
Chopper's like breaking through.
yeah,
He's a hacker.
yeah. He's able to do it. He's able to do it. Um, yeah. So I'm trying to think if there's anything more to this is we both
I
have a
got
lot
some
going
stuff.
on. We're recording this episode right after I had a medical procedure because the last this is going to be kind of a mini-sode. But any other last things you wanted, not last things, but any other kind of dynamics of the show you wanted to talk about?
Yes. First of all, we get Psy Snoodles.
Yes.
Ooh, mama. Finally, I see her origin and she looking bad as ever. And so she's like performing, I don't remember what planet at all, but she's performing in something that's very similar to like Jabba's palace. And guess who's also there?
Just for anyone who doesn't know, Cy Snoodles is we originally saw her in Return of the Jedi. She's the singer at Jabba's palace where she has this like long mouth stalk with her lips at the end of it.
She's like a frog.
Yeah, she's like a
Yeah,
frog,
with
but
like
like
a
with a
long.
long like snout and then lips at the end, which have like really nice lipstick on them.
Mhm.
And then like in the Clone Wars TV show, she's Zero's girlfriend and is basically like a 1920s she was straight out of Chicago, you
She's like
know,
a mob boss wife.
yeah,
Mob
mob
wife.
mall kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I loved seeing Psy. I love when they take little things from the past and make them into like bigger characters. That's a
Mm-hmm.
big thing for me. And then it's like the camera pans. Guess who's there? Max fucking
Max
Rebo.
Rebo, our boy, our boy.
Yes. Which I wish I could like transport myself better because I actually have Max Rebo in my bedroom. He's hanging up on the wall. I got a little Max.
I like it. I like it. I don't have a Max Rebo. I should have a Max Rebo. So
Get yourself a Max Rebo.
yeah, tell me when you next leave the house. I'll get one.
Damn.
I mean from the store. Of course, I mean from the store.
One thing I thought that was interesting in like that last arc that you didn't watch with the rune stones, the bad guy like was conspiring with this guy from the Empire to try and get like noticed by the Emperor. You know, it's just like a warlord trying to be like, but look, I'm important too. Like, give me a
Yeah.
rank or whatever. And in order to kind of like flush out our heroes, they drop like a mist over the entire valley with like this very toxic disease,
Mm-hmm.
which then he doses himself because he's a fucking idiot. So the warlord gets dosed. And so they're explaining this disease and they're like, yeah, like it's very like silent and whatnot and but and then at the very end, you vanish into nothing. I was like, I'm sorry, what the fuck?
Yeah, it's like a weird acid, like all the bodies disappear or something.
No, it literally they like turn transparent and just like fade away. Like at the end of the episode, when our antagonist is like getting screwed over by the Empire, the Admiral is like, well, you might want to go look for that vaccine yourself. And he looks and his hand is gone, and he's like, like you just disappear. I thought that was so funny. I was like, could you imagine if instead of having the blue shadow virus in season 1 of Clone Wars, we got this?
Yeah. And I think one thing to understand is that like I have talked in other settings. This is gonna feel like a weird comparison, but I promise this is gonna connect. I've talked in other settings about how like one of the reasons why it's hard to understand the logic of like ancient myths or the Bible or things like that is we don't think about how much the scientific revolution and things like that changed just like the fundamental nature of thought and the idea that like right now we believe that it is possible for us to scientifically understand how the sun works and like that wasn't always the case. Like we had thousands of years where humans did not believe like the sun was just a thing that happened. And the idea of like, how does it really happen? That question just wouldn't make sense because it was just out of the thought bubble of what was happening. The comparison I'm making here is it is fairly recent the idea that animation can look realistic. Like I think for a long time there was this sense of like animation's never going to look like real life, so we're not going to even try. So we're
Yeah.
going to do things that make no sense but it's because it's animation, so we're all just kind of in this like third world kind of a space. And
Yeah.
I think like, the super magic disappearing wasting disease is probably something along those kind of lines.
Probably.
So
Yeah, that made me giggle. I just have some 3PO quotes here
yeah, please hit
before
us
we
with them.
go. Just two important ones. So basically, we talked about this prince. They go back to his planet. They take over most of it. Then they're trying to make a treaty with like another tribal leader. And he's got this really hot daughter. And the prince like falls in love with the daughter and whatever. And then she gets kidnapped. Anyways, all that to say, she has a younger brother. And so we spend one episode just following her younger brother around, trying to figure out what he should do with his inheritance, which made me look at the show and I was like, I get why people fucking hate this. Like, I get it now because I don't want to be watching this right now. But it was fine because I was bleaching my hair, so I was busy anyways.
That to me was like the definition of a filler episode. Like it really felt like they were like, we don't know what to do with this main plot. We want to stretch it out a little bit. Let's just have we have this other character. Let's just have him do silly things.
Yeah, and I honestly don't even think that there was like a bridge to explain how they got from point A to point B. I mean, well, it explains like, yeah, like Jan goes off to the academy, so that's why
Right.
they don't stay with him anymore. But then it's like the next episode, they're just like Master Mungo, and I'm like, who the fuck is this guy?
Right.
Talking about Master Mungo, looks
Well,
like
and
fucking.
I think here it's also important that again, like all the stuff we think about of extended universes, like the technology just wasn't there at the time. A large part of why we can think of like everything fitting together is because like today, anything that happens under the name Star Wars, first, with the exception of the holiday special, and even that you can find it, but everything else is like easily available. Every single book that's ever been published is available on the internet. Every single episode of anything is available. And also there's things like Wikipedia where you can just click Psy Snoodles and it'll show you every single instance that Psy has shown up in every book, every TV show. Like you talk about, you'd never heard of it. I was a huge Star Wars fan. This was coming out the exact same time that the Thrawn books were coming out that I was really into. And I never heard a word about this show because this was a show marketed for little kids. And I wasn't little, but I was like, 11 or 12 by this point, probably. And just so it didn't exist in my world. And these episodes were on probably on a Sunday morning or maybe a Wednesday afternoon, who knows? And then they were gone. So like there was just a lot more freedom to like throw random crap at the wall in these shows because there was no sense of like that the people reading like the EU books are going to care about, oh, but that doesn't line up with what happened in the show, or like the people playing the Star Wars role-playing game.
Yeah.
There was no sense of like we would all connect this because we didn't have any ability to do that. So to me, it's fun watching this stuff, and when you realize how zany it is, it's not because they were thinking of this as an extended universe in the slightest.
Yeah. No, that is really interesting. It's like they were kind of like throwaway episodes. It's like, well, there's no sense of permanence really. Like maybe
Right.
someone records it, but that's interesting.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to this little bitch. This little kid brother bitch. I have money. I want to buy nice things. Anyways, he also has this little dog, right? Or animal of some kind. And it like comes running out, and I think it's like jumping all over 3PO or whatever. And 3PO's like, oh my God, I'm being attacked. Like, get this away from me. And the boy's like, no, this is like my dog. He's like a very rare, like, type of a thing. And 3PO looks at the boy. He goes, then I suggest you put him on a leash before he becomes even more rare. And I was
He's
like,
the most threatening 3PO ever was. Like,
I suggest you put him on a leash before he becomes more rare. Wow. To say
That was-
that to a child.
that was pretty intense. Like you expect like the dog attacks R2 and R2 makes some angry beeps and 3PO's like, don't say that to a child.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I remember hearing that and being like, whoa, that this is before we've really solidified exactly who 3PO is,
Yeah, it made me laugh. And then my other little 3PO quote was just like in that first episode, I think it was when he was being convinced to help out. He was trying to bait a wall gun into like shooting something. And so he's like standing in front of the thing and he goes, I must be out of my mental capacities.
It's so good. It was so good.
Yeah, there was a lot of good stuff, but like I said at the top of the show, I was high and busy when I did this, so I didn't write down all the quotes, but a few of the ones that popped out, I was like, I gotta.
That's fair. That's fair. And yeah, I do think that's a good description of the show. Like to me, it's not Star Wars canon. There's nothing about it that made like nothing in this made me rethink the Force in some new way.
No.
It does kind of reinforce the idea of like droids are treated pretty badly in this universe. But I don't think that's what they were going for. But it's an interesting way of showing like just how like little regard they had for it.
Mhm.
But it is fun. It's if you're really just like I need every piece of Star Wars lore that I can ever capture, watch it because it's only like 4.5 hours plus a 47-minute episode that might be like the most great thing that ever made, and maybe that's the story of how they get to like Captain Antilles, but we didn't see it, so we can't tell you.
We wouldn't know. I mean,
We'll
I think
we'll get Alex to watch just that because as I'll include a little note at the end of this, Alex did not watch the show. That's why he's not on this episode. But maybe we'll have
shame.
Alex take the bullet and watch season 2.
Ugh.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Erin. This has been great. Thank you to our listeners. No bonus episode today. This is kind of just a little mini-sode to have fun with. Like I said, I'm having a major medical procedure, so this was kind of a shortened week. But thank you on behalf of both of us. Live long and prosper.
I must be out of my mental capacities.
So it must be Tuesday.
Must be a Tuesday.
She brought R2-D2 over to help, but the droid was immediately distracted by the baby. Instead of contributing to the building project, he spent his time entertaining Ryu with a variety of noises and, until chastened, displays of controlled lightning. Friends, welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Generations podcast. We are doing our special book club, so if you're listening to this, you are a book club member and are very special. Or perhaps you are a regular listener who's getting a chance to hear the first part of this episode because we think that you're special. We won't know you're special till you give us your money. But we think that you're special. I mean, until you become a member. Only $5 a month, $55 a year. I don't know why my voice hit that high note, but you get to hear that kind of wackiness here in the membership episodes. Of course, this week for our book club in Star Wars, we're continuing. Of course, this week we are continuing our book club in Star Wars. We're talking today about one of my favorite books, the first published, although not first chronologically, of a wonderful series of books about Queen Senator Padma Amidala by E.K. Johnston. And this book that we're talking about today is Queen's Shadow. We will be having some spoilers for the book in terms of the general plot outline. But as we're going to talk about, this book is kind of a lot more about vibes than it is the specific plot. And I'm really excited about it. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you guys thought about it. And that little quote I wrote about R2-D2 babysitting a baby with lightning is a quote from the book. So I wanted to kind of open it off on that note. Erin, what'd you think of this book?
I loved this book. So you had mentioned these books a long time ago, and I had all these Audible credits saved up, and I bought the whole trilogy, and then I just stopped using audiobooks because my fixation moved on to something else. And I was like, no, now I need podcasts. I'm back to audiobooks, guys, and I'm loving it.
Welcome back.
Anyways.
And by the way, if you like audiobooks and want to listen to books on audible.com, check for the link on our show notes. If you can get a subscription, 1 year, I think you get to save some money and you get to give us some money. Everybody wins.
Especially us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had started listening to this book. I think I listened to because I was excited to listen to this book, but that's right when I lost my excitement. So I got through the first chapter, and then I was like, So then when I went to listen to it again, I was like, wait, I already started this book? And I was like, oh my God, tea. And then I just got into it. I listened to probably 4 hours of it in one day. I was just locked into this book. I really enjoyed it. It was really beautiful storytelling, and I liked being able to see the background of Padme and her handmaidens, or Amidala and her handmaidens, rather, because Padme is a secret. Shh.
And for those who haven't read it yet or listened to it, which is a kind of reading, we will be doing kind of a plot summary in a second or two, kind of bringing you up to speed. But I wanted you to start with general vibes. Alex, I understand you did not get a chance to read all the book, but you did kind of read the summary of it and listen to parts of it. And that's always good because we want sort of a voice of the people in terms of folks who haven't listened to it. Although, yes, I will record Erin and I saying, shame,
Yeah, that's fine.
Interplay
That's
under this
fine.
all.
I'm ashamed of myself.
But yeah, what did you think of it?
I liked it. I thought that it was interesting. Was I don't know what I was expecting, but
Uh-huh.
not a ton really happens in the book,
Yeah.
plot wise. But what I like about it is it really does a good job at introducing relationships between characters that we first met in the Clone Wars. That I really got excited about, and I don't know. I think I've always found the inner workings of the Senate interesting. And so getting little glimpses of that, and seeing the actual succession of power on Naboo, all those just behind the scene things you never think about, down to the little details of that the names of her protectors and handmaidens aren't their real names. They do that in honor of Padme, which is really cool. Just little world building, world deepening tidbits throughout the story that I thought made it a really worthwhile read.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one of my favorites. I really love it. It's funny because we've talked a couple of times about how we want a show that's just senatorial politics. And I had forgotten, frankly, how much senatorial politics is in this book and how much it's about just sort of the back dealing and how things work. So let me kind of give a quick summary. So this is the first book that E.K. Johnson wrote. She was approached by Star Wars, asked to write this book, and then because it was so successful, she was then given a chance to give kind of a prequel to it, Queen's Hope, which occurs earlier in time, and I'll reference it a bit, but this is kind of the first book written in the series, so I think it's a good one to start with. The book opens with the last days of Queen Amidala Padme as queen. Her reign as the democratically elected queen, which is a little bit of a weird sentence, but that's just part of the Star Wars world. Thank you, George Lucas. Is coming to an end, and she and her security team and her handmaidens are kind of all gathered together trying to figure out what comes next. And as you said, Alex, one of the things that this book is really about is the relationship she has with her handmaidens. If you remember from Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, Padme would at times switch places with her handmaidens, and all of them had some various training and things like this. This book goes into so much more detail about that and talks about how they are a really close-knit group of friends, but also a really close-knit group of operatives, and that they are basically acting as spies and as political diplomats. And so it goes a lot into the handmaidens that, who they are and what their relationship with Padme is. As you said, Alex, they all kind of honor the fact that Padme has these kind of dual identities as both Padme and then Queen Amidala. They kind of take on names that are related to Padme.
Yeah, like Sabe and Corday. That's why I named myself Alex Day for the podcast.
That's cute.
I like it. I like it. So the book is about this time when she's kind of wrapping up that time. Everyone's figuring out what they're going to go do next, and the new queen, asks her to become the senator. So this is kind of about halfway between Attack of the Clones and Phantom Menace, about 5 years after the events of Phantom Menace. She's about 19 at this point. Anakin is still a Padawan running around with Obi-Wan somewhere.
I was going to say he's a Padme fan for sure.
He's a
Padme fanboy. That is without doubt.
Fantasizing from a distance.
But he's not in this book at all. Her memory of him and her memory especially of his mother and wanting to deal with slavery on Tatooine is mentioned. But mostly it's about what's happening with her time in the Senate and her kind of starting to make moves and her starting to become allies with Senator Organa and Mon Mothma, and setting up a lot of the relationships that we'll see in the Clone Wars TV show, especially with Bonteri and Clovis and people like that. And also seeing a lot of the opening salvos of the negotiations that are going to become the Separatist crisis in 5 more years in the next movie. And as you said, there isn't much of a plot. There's kind of one big crisis that happens on a planet towards the end of the book where she gets to kind of do a lot of legislative back dealing and kind of resolve this issue she's been thinking about for the whole time of can she be an idealist or does she have to be a pragmatist, and how does she balance those? There's some great kind of small plot lines, but mostly to me, this book is about vibes. This book was to me about understanding Padme and her handmaidens and understanding the Senate and seeing how this all fit together.
Yeah, it's interesting. You both kind of pointed out there's not too much that happens in the plot. It doesn't go that far. And I'm like, that never occurred to me because I was just first of all, we all know I'm easy to entertain. Second of all, I was just so enthralled in every aspect of the book and every little story. And I was like, yes, I want to know the tea. The moment there was a tinge of romance, I was like, I'm going to need more time with Sabin or Sabe. I'm going to need a little more time there. That's what I'm gonna need from this book. Like,
I don't want to bounce around, but let's just talk about Sabe, that character who I think is the character played by
yes.
Keira Knightley. She's the one who is acting as Queen when they go to the Gungans, and then Natalie Portman, Padme,
Yeah, the
steps
fact that I
forward.
found out only a few months ago.
She's kind of like the second,
I know.
the first of the handmaiden. She's very, very close to Padme. They're able to kind of double as each other. And she gets a romance that is like not only like romantic, but like it's a little smutty for Star Wars. And I was not, I mean, it's very like YA fade to black, but the language leading up to that is like, okay, this is not what we're used to in Star Wars. I'm not complaining, but this is something very new.
I feel like smut in Star Wars should be more commonplace than it is.
I
if we're
think
being
it's
honest.
all over the internet.
It sure is. Lucasfilm's got to embrace it a little bit.
Yeah. So where do we want to start? Let's talk about the handmaidens.
You're badass.
Erin, what was kind of your take on getting to learn so much more about like this culture and the kind of community that they built and how they all work together?
Yeah, well, at first, like when I was listening to the first part of the book, and they're still on Naboo, like you said, kind of her last few days as the queen, and then preparing to like what's next, deciding that's going to be senator. And you get to know all of her handmaidens, and she's got quite a few. I feel like she has like 6 at the start, maybe. And so I'm like trying to remember all these names and like all the things that they're talking about doing when they're done with their leave, or not done with their leave, done with like her queenship, basically, because they're all going to move on and do different things. And I was like, okay, where's this going? And then she decided to be a senator, and it was that she wasn't taking any of those same handmaidens with her. It's 4 new gals. We got Corday, Versailles, damn, I was so on it. Dorme, and then Sabe's like on the side. Sabe's secret.
And Corday we will know as Corday is the one who dies at the
So
beginning
does
of Attack of the
Versailles,
Clones.
actually.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's correct.
Double homicide.
Yeah, and I love just that first part of, because it's funny, and when you said about how not much happens, but you're very entertained, I felt the same way. I felt like every page I was learning something new, and also just exploring a part of the story that makes sense, but we'd never thought about. And one of the things that they talk about a lot in that first part of the book is just how bad things were on Naboo, and like because it's the droids, because it's Roger, and like all we see is like the governor of Theed kind of saying like we're being massacred, Queen, you have to come back, etc. I forget the exact line, but we don't think about just how traumatic that is. But a lot of what they establish is that just how fucked up everyone is because of it. And that one big part of that is that one of the handmaidens, like that in the camps, in the prisoner camps, a lot of the handmaidens were basically running this little like resistance group. And one of them, the youngest of them, got arrested and was tortured. And they all honor her because she has these scars all over her body, and clearly like mental scars as well, because she never gave anyone up. And that I started crying just reading that part, because like, Phantom Menace, I think it is a lot of fun and there's a lot of cool things that happen in it. It's definitely not my favorite, but I think it's aimed at a fairly young audience. You don't think about it this way. And so her just being like, oh yeah, the droids were torturing people, and people have massive PTSD because of what happened on Naboo. That hit real hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of picture some of the torture that goes down in the Clone Wars that the droids carry out. And I feel like it probably was similar, but like, yeah, I don't know. It's like, it's interesting because my experience in Star Wars canon with the handmaidens extends a little bit beyond what we see in the movies, because I've read a very select amount of the comic books. Specifically, there's like this arc in the Darth Vader comics where he like basically finds the handmaidens having like grown up, former handmaidens of Padme, and like forces them to help him like find Padme's grave and all these things. And like in the comics, they are extremely badass and like stand up to him and like all these things. And so like I kind of had this picture in the back of my head that they were badass, and that just was reconfirmed in this book and in this, in these stories about, resisting torture and like being able to put themselves on the line, honoring Padme in just a really beautiful way. And like you said, like they're not just like, servants or like, doing it because it's their duty. Like they love her, they're friends. Like, they're doing this because they genuinely care about her, not just because they're like doing it for the good of Naboo or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually would be interested to like have a story. I mean, probably a little dark, but maybe a book or something that talks about what actually like even more detail what went down during the occupation on Naboo, because it just seems way darker than I ever thought it was in the past.
So, and I will say Queen's Hope, I don't know if we're going to do it on this podcast, but the next book in the series that's a prequel, it starts the day she becomes queen, and there's so much awesome in it, but the second half of the book is basically Phantom Menace from the perspective of the handmaids. So you do get some of that.
That
as
sounds
well as like
interesting.
their perspective. And yeah, it's I don't want to talk about it too much, but it is such a good book. It is such a good like girl
Hell
power
yeah.
book. Like it's both because they're all at this point like 13,
Yeah.
14. So it's both about them dealing with this like massive interplanetary conflicts and also like what happens when one of them has a first crush and like a concert they all want to go to and having to sneak out. And like there's one kind of like I'm so happy people are writing this in Star Wars, but there's one scene where the security guard who is super, super paranoid has put something in like their room that will sense blood as a way to like track if there's danger. And then everyone has fun with him, realizing that they put something in to sense blood for a bunch of 12 becoming 13, becoming 14-year-old girls, and why that doesn't work out very well in a way that a man would make
Yikes.
that mistake, but a woman wouldn't. It's a phenomenal book. It's so good.
That's
But
good.
yeah, with this one, I think that there's so much of that, just like getting to see more of these worlds behind what we normally talk about. And Erin, I want to hear from you, Alex, as well on this, but Erin, I want to start with you. One of the things that they really go into is how Padme and all of her handmaids together use fashion and makeup and hair as weapons, as tools in their arsenal. And to me, this felt very meta because they talk about how in the book, like in the world of Star Wars, a lot of people dismiss Padme because they're like, oh, she's just someone who it's just all about makeup and foofery for her. But I feel like also a lot of the fans have done exactly the same thing. Erin is someone who like obviously like is really into cosplay and like, you know, I know you and I have talked about like the importance of that kind of stuff. How did you feel reading this book and hearing about all the ways in which they were using that as tools for the work they were doing?
Erin's got to take a gulp of water to get her rant ready.
So when they started talking about like, I mean, first of all, I loved how they incorporated so much tradition and what the tradition means into the makeup and hair, because I think that's a really cool aspect and something that's like important to do in real life. But how they would wear,
Right.
you know, like a battle dress, like what she's wearing in the Phantom Menace apparently is a battle dress, like, and it has like
Yeah, it's black. It has full blaster armor. Built into it.
exactly, like she's prepped. And so they talk about one thing I really loved is getting to know the new handmaiden. I think it was Dorme was the one who was in charge of like hair and makeup once she was a senator, and to hear about how like her learning how to use makeup in that way and being taught how to do that, and the way that she like spends time and crafts like a specific makeup look that's going to highlight Padme's features, because like she's finally Padme. But she can practice it on anyone and make anybody look like Padme. Like, because she can just and that's like something that I really like. Is kind of like using makeup to make yourself look way different. And that's something you can totally do. That's something that I totally do, guys. Like if I'm going out with my girlfriends and I want people to leave me alone, I'm going to wear unapproachable makeup. Okay? We're talking like really bright colors, like really big, really alive.
That was just a preview of this month's members-only bonus episode for the Star Wars Generations podcast. To hear more of that episode, along with all of the members-only episodes for both this and the Superhero Ethics podcast, please become a member of the Ethical Panda podcasts. All the information is in our show notes. It's only $5 a month, $55 a year. Live long and prosper.